Welcome to Mean Green Game Day here at NTTV as we look forward to week 4 of college football as we look back towards last Saturday's demolition derby of a game between UAB and UNT, but we will actually look ahead to La Tech later on today. And here to break it all down is Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Lots to discuss here. Unfortunately, there's a lot of negatives to discuss, but Rachel, I'm going to start with you. What are some positives that we can take out of last week's 40-6 loss?
Well, here's a few positives. We only threw 1 interception. We had 6 points, which I didn't think were going to happen at all, and our defense only let them score 40. So this could have been way worse. I'm just happy we came out of this game having some dignity.
As bad as the game was, when everything goes wrong, there's only one way to go from there because, well, it can't really get much worse. You know, you were hoping to be more competitive in that game. You may not have gone into the game expecting a win, but a 40-6 loss at home in the way that it happened, I mean, UNT was coming into the game with a little bit of momentum, at least with some positive notes coming off the SMU loss in a game that ended up being closer than what a lot of people thought. So you were expecting a better performance from UNT, but again, when everything goes wrong, there's only one way to go up from here.
Piggybacking off Connor, there really is only one way to go but up. You know, it doesn't get much worse than coming out on the offense in the first drive of the game and you throw an interception right to the defender. So there really is nothing else to go but up.
So we're talking a lot of the offensive side of the struggles that we've had. And yes, we gave up 40 points, but the defense with 8 takeaways so far this season, that's tied with La Tech, who we play tonight, as well as Middle Tennessee, and that is number 5 in the nation with takeaways, with 8. So, Mark, I'm going to toss it back to you. What do you think the difference is that we're seeing this year with this year's team compared to last year's?
Well, the difference is, I know last year the defense allowed 517 yards a game, and now this year it's cut back to about 450. And you mentioned the takeaways, Zach. We're at 8 already. We had 9 in total all of last year. And I think a lot of that has to do with the linebacker play. KD Davis leads CUSA with 27 tackles, and he leads the team in sacks with 2. And Tyreek Davis as well, and having 21 tackles.
Connor, do you think that's the same reasoning?
Yeah, and I think it also has to do, remember how I pointed out a few weeks ago how it has to do with the psyche of the players? They seem to be more energized this season. Last year, it felt like UNT, and a lot of teams last year, it's like their psyches were not 100% into it. There was a lot of things that made last year difficult, and I think coming into this year, the comeback year, the super senior year, you had a lot of guys want to return this year because they wanted to finish their season or finish their college careers on a good note. And so I think we saw in the first game of the season, UNT seems to have a different energy, a different mindset this year, and I think that's where it starts. Yes, you notice the stats, you notice what's happening on the field, but more importantly, it's what's going on mentally. And that's where UNT's really improved this year, and they're playing more aggressively too.
Rachel, the UNT linebackers are going off right now. I mean, you have Tyreek Davis and Kevin Wood both tied at number 11 in Conference USA when it comes to tackling. Assisted tackles, solo tackles, I mean, they are always there. And then number 1 at the top of the list is our very own KD Davis. Describe the significance of having them.
You have the Davis trio, and I really think this defense would not be who it is right now without considering the coaching. I think without Phil Bennett, this defense would be a mess yet again, and I don't think this would be a great year. But I think the saving grace for us is Phil Bennett and getting a coach that knows what he's doing, and I'm grateful for that. And I don't think our defense would be – I think our defense would still be giving up 600 yards a game if it wasn't for him.
Well, Connor, I want to bounce back to you. Let's go to the offensive side of things. I mean, you mentioned that first snap of the game, interception for UNT. That's not the way you want – that's definitely not starting off on the right foot. So are we to be hasty right now, or would it be considered hasty to go ahead and put Austinani in early on in the game? We know Reuter's starting tonight. But should we start really lingering towards Austinani should be our starter?
I personally think so. Now, I'm not the head coach for UNT, but as I watch the game, and I have more experience watching and analyzing the game than I do as a head coach. I've never had experience coaching. But I think Austinani has looked better. I think the timing with the receivers has been better with Ani. Reuter seems to be a second off especially playing a defense like UAB who's going to play tight man-to-man coverage, is going to result in what we saw with the interception, or at worst case or best case scenario for UNT's perspective is an incomplete pass. So I think having Austin Ani at quarterback is going to help the UNT offense move more consistently.
Mark, Jace Ruder, he's got 3 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions. I mean, do you think, we knew he was going to be rusty coming in with the North Carolina transfer. He didn't play much at North Carolina thanks to injury. So, do you kind of want him to play a little more to see maybe this is all this guy can offer, or do you still give him a little more opportunities potentially to blossom?
I think his his leash is getting really short. Because bottom line, he's had 3 starts and he's thrown 5 interceptions, and he hasn't looked good in pretty much a lot of the starts. Ani, if you look back to Ani in this past game, he's still wildly inaccurate, and that's what he needs to work on. But he just looks a lot more poised in the pocket. He looks like he knows what he's doing more. So I think you should allow Ruder to at least get a little more comfortable in the pocket, even though it's already been 3 games and we're going into conference play today. But I think that leash has to get really short for Chase.
Rachel, both sides of the ball are displaying huge negatives, but when it comes to the statistical side of things, UNT is basically neck and neck when it comes to opponents' averages as well as UNT's, and that's so hard to see because when you see the score line, you're like, what in the world? You lose by 34, yet the stat line is like we lost by 3 points. I mean, You're talking passing touchdowns. We've given up 8 passing touchdowns to our 3. And rushing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns. We've given up 4, and we've scored 4. Penalty yards, we're winning 70-80. I mean, what can we go? Where can we go from here when everything is basically in our favor, but we're still losing at the end of the night?
I think our positives, at least for this team, you have to look at Torrey. He's been doing great this year. He's got a few more records to break today. I think he's going to definitely break at least one with them, 8 more rushing yards. And I think our defense is more positive. Just overall, it's really hard saying bad things about them just compared to what happened last season, being nearly last in every category. So the benefits of this year are a lot of these players are just getting more time and more time to play, more time to do better. I honestly think Ruder is better than Ani right now. I think his completion rate is what is going to save him, and I just think at least in short game, he's a better. But Ani has a little bit better of a long arm, so I think it really depends on what Latrell wants in a quarterback, if he wants the long ball, if he wants a short ball.
So speaking of Seth Latrell, many thought that the last game was going to be his final game because the last time UNT only scored 6 or 7 or less, they had a new head coach the next week. So do you think head coach Seth Latrell right now, the second, is still way on the hot seat?
This is a topic that I don't like to talk about a whole lot because, like I said earlier, I've never had experience head coaching, so I don't feel like I have the right to go on a tangent and say why this coach should be hired or fired. But from what I've seen on the field, things don't seem to be getting better. You always hope for improvement, and sometimes it's not so much about the what, like how. It's about the how. It's not. Okay, you lost to UAB, you lose to SMU. Those are good football teams. It's not so much about the wins and losses. It's more about how you're losing. Are you improving? Are you showing signs that the program is going on the uptick that you want? And right now, there doesn't seem to be much improvement.
Mark, what do you think?
I have to agree with Connor. It started at first when we had Mason Fine that we're going to become a really good football program and one to be very respected. Now Latrell's record is 32-33, and it looks like we're on the decline a lot. Since Mason Fine has left, we have only won 5 games, 2 of them to lackluster FCS schools, being Northwestern State and Houston Baptist, and then the other 3 being Middle Tennessee, Rice, and UTEP, which also are not good teams to rave about. So if you look at the bottom line of it, we're not improving at all, and so I have to say it is coming to an end.
Rachel, real quick, do you think that a loss today potentially moves Seth Latrell out of his seat?
I think a loss today is not good for the team and team in general. I think it just makes the seat even hotter. I think he's now the next guy to go to the Nick Saban coaching school in Alabama, and I just think it's not going to happen this year, unfortunately, for him. And I think that they're probably going to replace him with someone else. I can see Bennett stepping up in that position, but we'll see.
Well, lots of questions surrounding head coach Seth Luttrell and his hot seat. But when we return, we're going to talk other coaches around the league and about their hot seat potential. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day as we now look ahead to other potential head coaches throughout the College Football League, where coaches that are potentially on the hot seat. We talked about Seth Luttrell last segment. Now we have some other ones. One that really kind of surprises me, but is possible. LSU head coach Ed Orgeron. He hasn't had a losing record since his Ole Miss days. He's been 10 years in the league, 7 with LSU, but now is sitting at a 2-1 start. Rachel, does he have a potential to, potentially lead this team? I
think I'm worried for Ed for one reason. That national championship he had at LSU was based on a quarterback that had been at Ohio State and had already been really well developed. I think that's the only reason they won that national championship. I think he really needs to show that he can create a quarterback himself and that he can do things that other people can't. And I'm worried for him on that manner. And I really think Manny Diaz, I'm worried about him, but I think his saving grace right now is he is a transfer quarterback with Derek King, and it really depends on him. And with him not being there, I think he just needs to be able to develop a quarterback for some time. So that's my worry. I'm more worried about Ed over than Manny.
Okay.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
2016, at the end of the midway through the 2016 season, Ed Orgeron was named interim coach after Les Miles was fired after that Auburn game when LSU went into Jordan Hare. They had that potential last-second touchdown pass, and then it got overturned. So that following Sunday morning, news came out that Miles was fired, so Ed Orgeron becomes the interim coach. He does pretty well in the 2016 season for LSU. The rest of the 2016 season, they beat Louisville, Lamar Jackson in the bowl game. And then 2017 has a little bit of a transition season. Remember, they lost to Troy that year. They were losing to Auburn 20-0 at home. Then they came back. They had that punt return in the fourth quarter. Ended up pulling that upset. Somehow only lost by 2 touchdowns in Tuscaloosa that year. 2018, they finished with their first 10-win season since 2013, including the bowl victory over UCF. And they were projected to go 7-5 that year, playing Miami, who was ranked in the top 10 that year. 2019, obviously, they won the championship. 2020, COVID. They lose all the players, no offseason, new coordinators, and then here we are this year. And they were expecting a much bigger bounce back than what we've seen. When they lost to UCLA, it was in the fashion how they lost to UCLA. They were getting out-muscled at the line of scrimmage. SEC against Pac-12, that's not supposed to happen according to the media's perspective, although UCLA I did think was an underrated team coming into this year. But the thing with Ed Orgeron is people are going to look at it like Rachel said. Was it the coordinators and the players that won in 2019, or was it a little bit more with Coach O? Coach O is a part of the machine. He has to keep things fixed. He has to do his part to keep the well-oiled machine rolling. But he is a great recruiter and motivator. He's proven that over his coaching career. But does he hire the right coordinators? Joe Brady was actually recommended by Sean Payton, the head coach for the New Orleans Saints. So it's definitely an interesting time right now for Ed Orgeron. Today they play Mississippi State. LSU plays the Bulldogs in Starkville. I think that would be a good grading scale because Mississippi State's kind of bottom of the SEC West, and you still got a lot more difficult teams to play. So we'll see how that game looks for LSU in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned plenty of difficult teams. I mean, just this schedule, man, is tough. I mean, you host number 23 Auburn. You're at Kentucky. You take on number 11 Florida. At Ole Miss. At Alabama, take on number 16 Arkansas, who has A&M today, and then you finish this season hosting A&M. I mean, Mark, do you think he can piece together this team that obviously you don't have the same 2019 national championship team, but do you think he can hire the right people and put this system together, at least have another winning season with LSU?
I don't think he'll ever have another team like 2019. That team tied an NFL record with having 14 people drafted, which is unremarkable, really. I think he can. And I think Coach O is a very capable head coach. He's 47-15 as a head coach at LSU. He's very successful, and there's a reason for that. It's like Connor said, he is a great recruiter, but I do think he has that leadership of it to him to be able to hire the right people and have connections. There's nothing wrong with having Sean Payton recommend people, because that's what you do as a college coach. You make connections with people and try to build your team up to be the best that it could be.
Rachel, now let's go to some coaches that are actually on the rise. And you have Louisiana Raging Cajuns. You have Bill Napier. last 3 years, last 2 years, he's had a winning record. He had 11-3 and then 10-1 last year. Right now, sitting at 2-1. How do you like Bill Napier and what he's done to this Raging Cajuns team? And do you think the Raging Cajuns, their weak schedule, do you think it's time for them to make a leap in that regard?
I think it's a great year to be a Raging Cajun fan. Their record under him is 30-12. He's from the Nick Saban coaching school, with being from Alabama. He's claimed the Sun Belt Championship. He won a bowl game. He's got them in the top 25, which is a place they haven't been in a while. And I think it'd be a scary time to play against them. I mean, their schedule helps them by not being the best, but I mean, I feel like I'm worried for them as a whole just after this year, though.
Connor, I wanted to mention Coastal Carolina and what they've done so far and the success that they've been bringing. Jamie Chadwell really turning that program around from 3-9 and 5-7 to 11-1 last year, and right now 3-0. These guys are looking dangerous. What has Chadwell done?
Coastal Carolina has only been in the FBS for 5 years now, so that's insane when you think about how quick the transition and how fast they've been able to get up to America's team, if you will. So that's how they were viewed last year with the Mullets, and so obviously they've got some of the national media looking at them, and who would have ever thought that just a few years ago? Coastal Carolina, remember going into last year, they were projected at the bottom of their Sun Belt East Division. And they ended up winning the conference last year. They were going to play Louisiana in the Sun Belt Championship, and then that game got canceled due to a COVID outbreak. But Jamie Chadwell has done remarkable things at Coastal Carolina. They don't recruit that well, but they have one of the most efficient teams in the country. When you look at least amount of penalties, when you look at their efficiency from giving up tackles for loss, forcing tackles for loss, they do all the little things right. They have a very manageable schedule this year. Would not be surprised to see them get into the postseason, Sun Belt Championship game undefeated, or perhaps at worst with one loss. So yeah, Chadwell is a name to look for in the next few months to move up the coaching chain.
Mark, let's go ahead and switch subjects. USC, obviously ditching their head coach, Clay Helton. Now they're looking to see who can fill that void. Who do you think should take that hat?
As much as it hurts me just because I'm rooting for Cincinnati a lot, because I want them to make the playoff, I want them to be the first Group of 5 team. I think Luke Fickell is the perfect candidate for the job. You see how amazing he's been with Cincinnati, them being 38-14 over the years he's coached there, them being in the top 25 these past 3 years, and almost beating Georgia in a bowl game. He's done an amazing job at Cincinnati, and a coaching job as high as USC, I think he would do great in.
Connor, some of the big names that are candidates right now is Penn State's James Franklin, obviously Luke Fickell that Mark just mentioned, as well as Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniema. I mean, you have some big names here that potentially could take this spot. Who do you think should
I think James Franklin's a name to watch for, Luke Fickell is, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dante Williams, the interim coach for USC at the moment, becomes their head coach. He's been around with the program for a few years now. He's a terrific recruiter. Nationwide, he's viewed as one of the best recruiters. So I would not be shocked to see him take that role as the head coach.
Rachel, what are your thoughts?
I've heard, well, over the years, Iowa State has done a very good job. I think Matt Campbell is very high likely to be on that list. He's losing a lot of players this year. He's going to get way better recruits being at USC. It's not a bad time for him to leave because he left the program on a good note. He's done a lot of things for Iowa State that have made them that Iowa State would never have been able to do without him. And obviously California recruiting is going to be a lot better than trying to convince people to come to Iowa with the history and the location. So I think this is a good time for him to leave Iowa State and go to USC.
So the reason that I mentioned Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniema is the fact that years ago and he's yet to be a head coach, but years ago he actually mentioned that he would love to head coach the USC Trojans. So that's definitely in his radar. He could potentially be a prospect. Now, you mentioned Donnie Williams. He's actually the first black head coach to head coach the USC Trojans. There's a chance if this guy does good, he could have the job, just like Connor mentioned. Now, I want to mention a guy that potentially has the slightest chance, Urban Meyer.
I knew that was coming when you said slightest
Urban
chance.
Meyer. You have Jacksonville Jaguars. He mentioned just after last week's loss that every week it's like playing Alabama. Well, you go back to college, you're not technically playing Alabama every week. Would he like to maybe take that USC job?
Well, with the USC boosters, kind of like Texas trying to hire the best coach out there that they view at the time, this would be a hot take or a hot get for USC with their boosters. So obviously they would support it, but we're going to see if Meyer's open for that.
I think he's just going to stay. I don't think he's going to leave. It's too early for him to leave. I think it would be dumb of him to do that too early.
Well, we shall see. But when we come back, we will talk the overrated teams and the underrated teams. Stick around for that. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. This segment, we're going to dissect what Conference UA teams are overrated, what Conference USA teams are underrated. I'm joined by Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Let's go ahead and get into it. Rachel, who is your underrated? Let's go and start with your overrated. Who's your overrated Conference USA team?
My overrated Conference USA unit right now would be the Western Kentucky Rushing. They really haven't done anything this year for this team, which makes Western Kentucky seem very predictable in the passing game. This is not a good thing for the team overall because it makes them very easy for opponents to predict. But they have had a very good passing game. They've only, against UNT Martin, they were only able to get 109 yards rushing. And then against last week against Army, they were only to get 42. And it's not a good thing for them because you need to be able to make your offense less predictable. And when you just do it passing the entire time, it is very hard to do that.
Connor, who's your overrated?
I'm actually going to stay with I'm going to go underrated, then I'm going to hit overrated. So underrated team, I'm going to actually say Western Kentucky because I wanted to bounce off of that. Underrated because they have a quarterback that not a lot of people were talking about over the offseason, Bailey Zappi, transfer from Houston Baptist. I talked about him a few weeks ago on the show. Bailey Zappi has performed very well so far. You're right, though, Rachel. They don't have much of a rushing attack, so that one-dimensional offense may cost them as the season progresses, as they start to play better teams. But Western Kentucky is a team to watch for in the East Division because I don't think the quarterback play across that division is going to be very strong this year. And they have a tough non-conference schedule with Army. They play Indiana today, Michigan State next week. I don't know if they'll win any of those games, but they're certainly a team to watch for in Conference USA.
Mark, overrated?
My overrated team has to be UAB. Now, I know they just beat us 40-6. We're bad. Don't let that fool you. UNT's not that good of a football team, sadly. The only other team they've beaten this year is Jackson State, and that game was actually very close, and then they got shellacked by Georgia. But UAB, their quarterback situation is always a little iffy, and their running backs, they don't have a stout running back or a stout receiver. So I feel like even though they are a very good team, I'm not saying they're not a good team. I don't think they will win the CUSA this year, and I know that's basically where the expectation is for them. So that's why I'm saying they're underrated. They're overrated.
That is the expectation because that's where they sat 2 years ago here in the Conference USA, is that they were the Conference USA champs. So do you think, do they have a big foe coming up that will?
Oh, yeah, it's my underrated team.
Okay.
It's my underrated team.
Peek.
Yeah,
I like it. Cool.
I got you.
All right, so my overrated is actually going to be Marshall. They had a great start last year as well as this year. They're okay. They took out Navy with ease, 49-7. Last night, as you see right now, Appalachian State was the team to beat, and yet they did not. In the waning moments, 31-30 on a game-winning field goal by App State. But this team, they had a great rushing game against Navy, and they have not shown any sort of light to that since. So they're going to have to get back on that rushing attack and really kind of balance things out in order to make themselves really Conference USA, potential, winners in the Conference USA standing. So we'll see how that goes. But let's go ahead and go to the underrated side of things. Rachel, who you got?
I have an underrated quarterback for you. I think super senior Austin Kendall for La Tech is a very well experienced player. He's got the leadership that you need at quarterback. He learned under two Heisman winners at Oklahoma. He's had it close games, and he's brought them into games that I think they didn't even have a chance in. I didn't think he had a chance to get SMU, but he gave them 351 yards and 7 touchdowns. And he's got a 61.8% on his throws. There's some mistakes with him with interceptions. Those are things that can be fixed. But I really think he's given La Tech the chance this year to at least give give some of these teams in the West a run for their money. So I would really keep an eye on him if I were any defenses out there.
So when we mentioned early on that the UNT defense, I mean, they're number 5 in the nation with 8 turnovers right now, all 9 last year, just like Mark mentioned earlier. Do you think Austin will have a pretty decent game this week, or do you think that the UNT defense can respond?
I do not think the UNT defense can respond. I mean this nicely. I want to see UNT do well, but my only thing is I think Austin Kendall is just that much better. So I think that it's going to be a struggle for them in the secondary, but if they can be able to contain him, we'll see how it goes.
Connor, underrated team.
Well, I talked about the underrated team.
Oh, that's right.
Time.
Yeah, so you got the overrated.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll talk about the overrated, and I agree with you, Zach. You said Marshall; they're also my overrated team. Last year, they took advantage of an easier schedule to start off with, and they were able to do well. They performed very well, actually, in those games, and I think that kind of created a fool's gold situation to where the national perspective was, oh my gosh, look at Marshall. They're undefeated. Look at them. They're kind of coming up out of nowhere with the young quarterback. And Grant Wells has performed very well, but they took advantage again of those easier teams. And as they played the better teams later on in the season, they didn't perform as well, and the offense didn't look very good at all. Coming in this year, you couple that with the fact that they're losing their coaching staff, lost a lot of their star players to the transfer portal. And this season, when everyone's bringing back everyone, Marshall was losing a decent amount. And I think I also want to talk about something else in regards to that. This is the super senior season. So you got all these teams returning everyone, and we've seen a lot of upsets. And no one, it's an environment this year with college football to where no one seems safe on any given weekend. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, even Oklahoma doesn't look as elite as they usually do. They don't look invincible, and I think that has to do with the fact that those teams always have to reload. They always are losing X amount of players or X amount of coordinators, and everyone's talking about how this is going to be the year they fall off the map, or this is going to be the year that someone else can unseat them in their division or conference. And they reload and they perform very well the following season. But what's different about this year is that while those 4 teams I just talked about lose a lot, again, everyone else returns everyone. That's why I think we are seeing this upset mania in college football.
Mark, you had a cliffhanger earlier. You were teasing them. Who's your underrated?
Give me the UTSA Roadrunners. This team, I'm starting to fall in love with them. They are really undefeated. They've been Illinois, Lamar, Middle Tennessee, and they have a really good game today against Memphis. That should be a barn burner. The dynamic trio that they have, Frank Harris, who, as you mentioned, super senior, McCormick, the running back, and Franklin Zakari. These 3 can play some football. Like 662 yards for Frank Harris has thrown for, 346 yards that Zakari Franklin has had, and he has 22 receptions, which leads the CUSA. And their defense allows only 163 yards passing and then only 81 yards rushing. This team is very good, and I do think they are my favorite to win the CUSA. But that's.
They play UAB at home this year, and UAB is not quite as good on the road as they are at home. So
that's true. And we'll see how UTSA does. I also had UTSA, but strictly to their defense. They're number 10 in the nation. They got 244 yards per game that they'll allow by the opponents. But as you mentioned, Frank Harris, the senior, is doing just enough to withstand and push UTSA to potentially a Conference USA title. We shall see. But one thing that I kind of want to look down to is that you have a lot of these young teams, such as UTSA. Years past, when they take on teams such as Texas, early on the season they'll take on those harder competition. But UTSA, they're on the rise, as are many other teams. And then you look at some of your top tier teams: Ohio State, Alabama, OU, potentially even a little bit of Texas. They're on the lower, they're starting to fall off. Why do you suppose that is, Rachel?
I think a lot of these teams, the transfer portal, I think, has made a huge difference for all of these teams. You're seeing a lot of quarterbacks in this transfer portal that you wouldn't see before. I mean, SMU's got a transfer quarterback. La Tech's got a transfer quarterback. Multiple transfer quarterbacks in these schools that you would not get these players at traditionally. I think that transfer portal has been a huge difference maker for these smaller schools, and that they've taken advantage of it. That's why a lot of the bigger schools hate this transfer portal. They would love to get rid of it. They hate it. Yeah. So I think that transfer portal is huge. So I think that's what makes a difference this year, seeing teams that are doing increasingly better than the bigger schools.
parity is being stressed in all sports right now. All sports are becoming more of an entertainment or in a business side of things more so than the sport today. And because of that, people are gonna want to see the idea of new. They want the idea of change. They don't want to see the same old, same old. So parity again is going to be stressed. And because of parity, there's going to be rule changes here and there, and one of them is going to be the transfer portal. And the transfer portal, I believe, is going to become as big as recruiting is right now in the near future. We have recruiting rankings right now. I would not be surprised in the next several years if we start to see the same thing with transfer portal rankings to see how coaches utilize that.
Yeah, Connor said this, I think it was before the show. There's free agency in college football today. If the player does not like their situation, they will go, and they will go to find a better opportunity for themselves. And whether that gives more parity to the league is honestly great to me. I love seeing upsets like that.
Well, there's a lot to discuss in that regard, but I mean, it is obvious though that a lot of these teams are on the downward trend. I mean, it's not just me. I mean, you see Ohio State, and yes, they're ranked number 10 at the moment. I just don't think they're going to be able to come back for the playoffs this year. But I mean, just a lot of young talent. But you see programs such as Alabama who do lose a lot of talent. I mean, you say, the 2019 LSU. Yes, it is a record, but Alabama, they lose a lot of players every year, especially defense in their offensive line. I mean, they lose a lot of players every year and still rebuild and they reload, rather than starting all over again. And what they're seeing right now with Bryce Young, do you think that Alabama, he's going to be able to, Alabama, do you think they're going to stay at the top? Or do you think they'll be waning next?
I'm worried about his youngness. And I'm worried about his youth because those big games this year are going to be huge. I'm kind of interested in seeing the Iron Bowl myself, but I think Alabama's still going to stay near the top. It's Alabama. It's really hard to say they're not going to. It's hard to say they're going to drop it all.
Connor, quick comment.
He can keep his name young on the depth chart, but he may not be able to stay young on the field for very much longer. But I think the reason why you're seeing Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson not look as elite this year is because we just have so much experience this year in college football.
Mm-hmm. Interesting stuff. But when we return, we're going to talk over UNT and La Tech as they square off tonight at 6 o'clock. Stick around. Preview when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. Now we're going to look ahead towards tonight's matchup between the UNT Mean Green at the LA Tech Bulldogs. So let's go ahead and dive right in, but let's preview this actually a little bit. So La Tech, they've won 12 of the previous 19 matchups. Let's not talk about the in-between. The very first game these two played was actually back to 1976, that's when North Texas was North Texas State, and they actually beat La Tech 14-8. Now, there were combined 6 interceptions in that game. 6 interceptions, 3 by UNT, 3 by La Tech, and well as 3 combined fumbles. Boy, a defensive battle and a defensive dream compared to what, we're having right now, and no defense. But those 3 are there, and then you have UNT. Check this. UNT, fourth quarter, going into the fourth quarter, 98 total yards of offense. 98? They were up 7-0, and they actually go on, and that's thanks to a 100-yard interception return to the house. I mean, what in the world? Will we have that sort of game today? We shall see. But let's go ahead and bring everybody in. Who are some key players that y'all are looking for today, Rachel?
I mean, I would love to see that. Let's start with
Wouldn't we all?
Georgia Clemson? Oh.
Of course. I think our running backs this week are going, or our wide receivers, are going to need to have a big game. I think Roderick Burns and Deontay Simpson, they haven't really shown up for us this year, and I think this is the time they need to because we've got a lot of injuries there, and those two look to be the ones to beat. So that's that. And then I think Torrey's going to have a big game, as always.
Louisiana Tech is one-dimensional. Rachel talked about how Western Kentucky's one-dimensional as well. Louisiana Tech definitely favors their passing game. They struggled running the football consistently, so look no further than for UNT for their secondary to perform at least okay to keep things in front of them today.
Let's hope so, Mark.
Yep. I'm thinking the linebackers got to step up. The linebackers have always been the bright spot for our defense. Tyreek Davis and Katie Davis, they're you don't have to talk about them. They're very good. They are good players. I think they're probably the best unit on our defense. So because La Tech does not pass at all, they need to watch out for Austin Kendall, who's thrown for 837 yards and 7 touchdowns. And like they said, they're one-dimensional. They will throw the football until they can't anymore. And they have to watch out for a little slot receiver from La Tech named Smoke Harris. He is their go-to third down receiver, like the little slot, like Tom Brady's Wes Welker.
Smoke Harris, what a name, man!
Yeah, what a name.
Smoke Harris. Be looking for that on your statistical
I hope we don't get
sheet.
smoked.
I know. Oh my gosh. All right. But, see, so LA Tech, my key players to watch. Obviously, you have Austin Kendall and what we mentioned. I mean, just the dude's a torch when it comes to torching up defenses. But I think for UNT, as cliche as it is, it really does matter, and that is UNT quarterback Jace Ruder. You cannot start a game like you did last game. First play of the game, you throw a pick. Now, we did mention before the show, this is a defense you can pass on.
Yeah.
Will Jace Ruder do that? We shall see. When we go back to the QB comparison, UNT last year had a lot of big plays, and that's kind of what ignited a few of our wins. And that's something that a lot of people were like, oh, we need the big plays, quit going down short, quit going short. Well, Austin Ani and Jace Ruder both are tied for the longest pass play, 45 yards. Both of them have it, so it just doesn't happen very much. But I don't know. This is an offense that you can really pass on. So I feel like if you do not take advantage of that in the first quarter early on, I think that's when you make your QB change. Is that right?
Yeah, and you may have to go punch for punch in this game, score for score with Louisiana Tech. I hope that the defense is able to contain Louisiana Tech to a degree to where UNT doesn't have to score on every single possession. But if it does get into that kind of matchup to where we have to keep trading score for score, things are going to get interesting.
I think Louisiana Tech, I think maybe something we can look out for is hopefully an interception here and there. Maybe one interception. He's thrown one every game so far this season. That's our hope, and maybe not to worry about the running backs near as much, but because they haven't had very many. I mean, super senior running back Marshall Williams Jr. only rushed last week for 65 yards, and that's just something that most teams can't have, and UNT doesn't do that very often. So I just think we need to be more well aware of that in the secondary.
I will say, I do think this is the perfect game for Austin Ani to be the quarterback, because I think he has that firepower capability for the offense, and I don't think Jace Ruder can do that.
So let's go to the defensive side of things ahead of this game. Phil Bennett, now the new defensive coordinator for the Mean Green, and he's really he's tried to lessen the fire, if you will, that this dumpster fire of a defense that we experienced last year. So he's trying to squirt a little water onto it, but last year the team averaged giving up 572 yards a game. Since Phil Bennett has come in, it's gone down about 120 yards, now 453 yards, but it's really going to come down to the corners. The corners have been beat deep. The corners and the safeties have been able to have shown that they can be beat deep several times this year. That's something that they're really going to have to, I mean, now this week with a guy who's a gunslinger, you're relying on your corners. Is that a good thing? I mean, how do you prepare?
It's not a great thing, but what you can do to prepare is, because you know coming into this game that this is a one-dimensional offense, what you can do to provide support for your corners is to drop 7 or 8 into coverage. So if you want to play a 2 or 3 deep, have your safeties in the back because Louisiana Tech's not going to run the football, the safeties don't have to come into the box to try to support the run game, which means, again, they can help support the corners. So at least Louisiana Tech is a one-dimensional team to where you know you can plan for the pass rather than have to watch for the run game as well.
Yeah, they can stay. UNT can stay in a nickel defense pretty much all game today, or even switch to a dime, because they don't need to worry about the run. La Tech's leading rusher has 185 yards on the season. People get that in a game. You don't have to worry about the run when it comes to La Tech.
My worry for La Tech is that they've kept their scores really high this year. They've only lost twice this year, but they were by single, 3 points and 1 point, or 2 points and 1 point, and they got lucky last week after they lost on the Hail Mary that Tanner Mordecai ended up throwing. So I think for us, it's the offense that needs to be the difference. I think our defense just needs to do their job and do what they can, but I think our offense really needs to step up and score way more than 6 points today to even have a chance.
Can we talk about Roderick Burns? I mean, this guy is the only reception when it comes to Jace Ruder finding his way into the end zone. 3 touchdown passes, all to Roderick Burns. Now, Burns, he has 18 catches and 255 yards so far with UNT. Throughout his entire high school career, he had his senior year, he had 18 catches at Lamar High School. That's the entire season. We're ahead to week 4, and he's got 18 catches, 255 yards. Talk about this young talent.
Oh, he's a tremendous talent. Some guys just have a knack to make plays. When they're double, triple team, they still find a way to get open and move the chains for the offense. He's that kind of guy. What's unfortunate, though, from UNT, though, is we progress through the season. We have to get more guys involved because the unfortunate thing is you're going to have defenses key in on him, and he may not be having the stats like he did the first couple of weeks. But what's great about having an individual like this is you know who you can throw to when it's a dire situation. It's always good to have that for your offense.
So somebody we haven't talked about too much is DeAndre Torrey. DeAndre Torrey, he had his big breakout game in week 1, 320 all-purpose yards against Northwestern State, and he's ranked number 7 in the nation in all-purpose yards. Do you think he could make an entrance today and potentially be your X-Man, if you will?
I mean, he's got 3 or 4 records right now on the brink. He's got 174 more to move up a spot in all-purpose yards. He's got 8 more to move up in rushing, and he needs 1 more rushing touchdown to be tied for either 4th or 5th on the list. I think Torrey needs to have a good game, and I think he can be able to do that. I think Army was able to get like 300 yards rushing off of them, and if they're giving up rushing yards, you have to go with what they're giving you, and if that's what happens, that's what's going to happen.
So a chance for the UNT senior line to pave the way for DeAndre Torrey, correct?
Yeah, especially since they need a bounce-back game after what happened with UAB. UAB's D-line dominated our O-line. They rushed 3 and they were able to get back there. So it should be a very good game plan in order to use DeAndre Torrey a lot. And I want to bounce back to Roderick Burns. Congrats to him because he did earn a scholarship on Twitter.
That is correct. Yes,
so
that is correct.
To him. He's definitely our playmaker on offense when it comes to the wideout after Jalen Darden left. So I'm happy for him.
We'll definitely be looking for him. But when we return, we're going to talk over some predictions. Big teams coming up. We'll discuss them when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Let's go ahead and talk some big predictions today. Our first matchup is college football game of the week. Texas A&M Aggies at Jerry World taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. I personally have Arkansas. I think the steam that they had against Texas, I think if they can put in a pretty good amount of their crowd into AT&T Stadium, I think they have a chance. Rachel.
I agree with you. I think Arkansas has a great chance. I think a person who's been at quarterback longer and has been there longer is going to do better. And then with A&M losing Kellen Mond, I think it's up to Arkansas.
These games are usually close between these two teams. It's going to be a fun game, I think, today. The over-under is about 47. I don't know if it's going to be hit. I could see a 17-14, 20-17 kind of game.
Okay.
I would not be shocked to see Arkansas outgain Texas A&M. I think the difference is going to be Texas A&M forces Jefferson, the quarterback for Arkansas, to have to pass, force a turnover, a key turnover. Texas A&M finds a way to win.
Mark, who you got?
Now, if this game was in Arkansas, I would have picked Arkansas. But I think I'm going to have to go with A&M. A&M is not UT. I'm sorry, Zach.
Shots fired here in the
A&M
studio.
is a lot better than UT, so I'm going to have to go with A&M.
All righty. Let's go ahead, and next is Memphis and UTSA. We just mentioned UTSA earlier and the chance that they have to be Conference USA champs, but we'll see. I'm going to go with the underdog here. I've got Memphis. I'm going to go Memphis this week. What you got?
I've got UTSA. You cannot deny Frank Harris. He's done so well at quarterback. He had 264 yards last week and 2 touchdowns to beat Illinois, and not last week. But I think it's UTSA.
UTSA may be road running their way to victory today, but
Get 'em
you got Memphis coming off the big time win against Mississippi State for last week, so
Right.
We'll see how they bounce back from that. UTSA is coming off a 2-touchdown win against Middle Tennessee, right? So people are going to look at it like, well, Memphis should win at home. Great game. I could see a high-scoring game, 38-31 kind of score. I think UTSA will find a way to win and put the country on notice for sure.
I'd like to see a shootout. Mark, what you got?
You know, I was raving about UTSA. I have to pick UTSA. Although, do shout out to the quarterback from Memphis, Seth Hennigan. He was my quarterback when I was in high school.
Okay. Then we got Western Kentucky versus Indiana. Now, Western Kentucky and Indiana. You mentioned Western Kentucky earlier.
I did.
I have Indiana taking this one at Indiana. I think the Hoosiers got it. What you got?
I also have Indiana. I think Penix Jr. is going to have a good breakout game. He hasn't really had that this season. I think I'd be worried for WKU in this game.
Yeah, Penix needs to have a turnaround game, and I think he will. I think Indiana's going to win this game. However, it should be noted that Indiana's coming off the Cincinnati game, and they've got Penn State next weekend. Western Kentucky's coming off a bye. So that should be noted. I think it's going to be a great game. You got two really good quarterbacks, Penix against Bailey Zappi. A lot of points in this one, too, but I'll go with Indiana on the road.
Indiana had a big first half there last week as well. Do you think they can transpire that into this week against WKU?
Certainly. I think in some ways, you look at the score, Cincinnati won by 2 touchdowns, but Indiana actually outgained them. So I think Indiana, they got a lot of frustration mustering inside of them right now, and I think that's going to come to fruition today. I think they're going to win, but be careful. They can't look ahead.
Okay. Mark?
I'll go with Indiana as well. I think they'll bounce back after a tough Cincinnati loss.
Alrighty, now let's transition our way. We got Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish against Wisconsin. At Wisconsin, I have Wisconsin. Rachel?
I also have Wisconsin. I think Mertz has a lot to prove after that Week 1 loss. And Notre Dame is more of a comeback team. I don't really think they're going to be able to do that against Wisconsin today.
I'll go with the Badgers. They're more physical along lines of scrimmage today, and I think their defense contains the Notre Dame offense. Notre Dame's defense hasn't been great. I think Wisconsin finds a way to do better in the red zone than what they did against Penn State.
Is Wisconsin legit? Do you think they can keep climbing maybe to a top 10 spot?
Actually, yes. They've got a very manageable schedule at this point forward. The most difficult game after this, they play Michigan at home, but I don't know about Michigan in terms of being elite just yet. They've beaten up on lower tier teams. Michigan's improved, obviously, but they have to go to Camp Randall, which they haven't won in over 20 years. And the next toughest game for Wisconsin is going to be Iowa, and they get that in Camp Randall as well. Wisconsin's a team to watch for to move up in the polls.
Okay. Mark, what you got?
I will be the lone wolf, and I'll pick Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame will be able to just end up edging out. It's going to be a close game. Don't get me wrong, but I think Notre Dame might end up edging out Wisconsin today and to set up an amazing game next week with Cincinnati.
Well, it is a close game. In fact, right now, this moment, we had a score update in the commercial break. It's actually 3-0 Notre Dame at the moment, so we'll see. Pull it out. We shall see. So a big one right now that UNT can relate to, SMU. SMU hosts TCU. So a large spread on this one. What was it, like 45-point spread, something like that? It was a big one. But let's see. So we have TCU, SMU. Personally, I have the Horned Frogs taking this out. Rachel, who you got?
I disagree. I think SMU is going to take this one. Mordecai's got great leadership out there. He threw last week 395 yards, 3 touchdowns. He has a great running game with Siggers and Bentley, and it's going to be hard to see this game.
To answer your question, yes, Bama is favored by 45 in that game, and I have TCU winning this game against SMU. I think it's going to be a higher scoring than some people think. Some are saying that TCU's defense is going to bounce back after that Cal performance, play better. SMU's got a really talented offense, but I think TCU will find a way to win.
I'll take SMU. They won last year 38-35, and that was the first time they won since 2011, but I think they'll be able to continue that. I don't think they'll win on the Hail Mary like they did against La Tech, but I think they get the W today.
Yeah, definitely lucked things out last week, but hosting, obviously, TCU today, so we'll see if that upset can happen. Right now, another score update. It's actually 14-14 in the second, so as Connor mentioned, potentially a high-scoring game. It's a shootout early on. What's like some score prediction maybe for this game? If we really think it's going to be a shootout, what you got?
38-35.
30 again?
Yeah.
You got to go back to back?
Hey.
I think it's within a touchdown, so.
I'm going to say 42-31 TCU.
42-31. We have a game-winning potential field goal, maybe another Hail Mary. We shall see. And then a close game here as well. Okay, interesting. Finally, we're going to hit UNT and the Mean Green travel to La Tech. A lot of expectations here for UNT, a lot of things to turn around. But for the offensive side of things, this is a team that UNT could take advantage of to try and get themselves back on somewhat of a decent track, especially for the quarterback side of things, because for the last year and a half now, that's been the main question of concern. The running back, fine. Defense, it could be better, but the turnovers, hey, that's awesome on record pace. But for the guy leading you out of the tunnel, Jace Ruder or Austin Nani, one of them has to step up now. You cannot go out throughout the entire rest of the season like this. But UNT, I'm going to go UNT. I'm going to go the oddball out. I'm going to say the unicorn, I mean, the dream is going to come alive tonight at La Tech. They're going to piece it together. I don't care if it's by 1 point. UNT, going to find a way. They're going to win.
I disagree with you. I'm sorry. I want to see UNT
saw it
win just
coming.
as much
It's
as the
okay.
next person.
I'm a homer.
But UNT's offense is just, there's so many question marks for that. Our defense may be what saves us in the end, but I hope they get better. And for UNT to win, though, Torrey's got to be record breaking.
Yeah,
Connor,
for
what you
UNT
got?
to win, I think they're going to have to keep the Louisiana Tech offense off the field. You know, Louisiana Tech's going to come in this game wanting to emphasize improving in the secondary. So if UNT can come out with a running game, keep their offense off the field, that would be ideal. But I've got Louisiana Tech winning this game. They're at home. You know they're going to be frustrated coming off the loss to SMU and how they lost it. And they also how they lost to Mississippi State a few weeks ago. So this could be a Louisiana Tech team that could be undefeated right now, although they also have a close win. But I think the high variance team for Louisiana Tech wins at home today.
So wins at home big time, or do you think they're going to have the exact same sort of outcome to their previous 3 games, and that's keeping it close?
I could see a 10, 14-point spread.
Okay. Mark?
I wanted to correct myself. SMU won last year 41-38, and my
Okay.
prediction was 38-35.
38-35. Okay, cool.
All right, but anyways, I'll have to go with La Tech. I'm sorry, but La Tech, I do think it'll be closer than what a lot of people think because La Tech seems like all 3 of their games come down to the wire. I don't know if it'll come down to the wire, but I have La Tech winning.
Well, I appreciate y'all's time. We got a lot to look forward to tonight. Hopefully, the Mean Green can show some more positives for when we return next week. Next week is a bye week, but the week after, hopefully, we have a lot to look forward to. But that's going to do it for us here. You can find us on Twitter, YouTube, and many of our other social media handles at NTTV Sports. As for Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera, and our amazing cast and crew behind the scenes, I'm Zach Fox. Thank you for your time this time. Until next time, God bless.